Was Hitler inevitable? John Maynard Keynes was a young attaché on the British negotiating team that helped come up with the final surrender terms for Germany at the end of World War I. He resigned in disgust when France forced the annexation of Lorraine and Alsace. At that time, in 1919, he wrote a treatise, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, that laid out how those treaties would create the catalyst for World War II. And he was almost entirely correct. Hitler or not, World War II happened. What is not entirely clear is, do we have the extermination of Jews, blacks, gays and disabled? Likely to some extent, but not entirely sure. Hitler was hardly the only Nazi in Germany. He wasn't even the only fascist leader in Europe. He was just a better orator than many of his party. It's possible that with someone less charismatic at the head of the Nazi party they wouldn't have been quite so popular. But clearly the population was already steeped in xenophobia and desperate to be told that they were the most intellectually, physically, and morally superior human beings in existence. So no, if Hitler were murdered as a baby, I'm sure there still would have been some form of fascism in Germany. Himmler would still be there to create his concentration camps. Thanks to the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was ripe for fascism. So I think some sort of fascist would have been inevitable. No, Hitler wasn't inevitable. You're thinking of Thanos. There's a possibility without Hitler, the Nazis win. Yes. See Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot for example. 20th century history is rife with brutal, totalitarian, terror regimes led by dictators. Stalin for example only hasn't gone down in history as terribly as Hitler because he was our ally. And his massive purges of millions were mostly Soviet internal. There's nothing unique or special about Hitler. We will have leaders like him again. Here's a hot take for you. WW2. Hitler included prevented the apocalypse. Hear me out. Because of WW2 nuclear weapons were invented and used during wartime, but because only one country had them. We learned about the horrors they caused during a time at which retaliation was impossible. If nuclear weapons had been invented during peacetime, it's quite likely several countries would have had them before they were ever used. When the inevitable war did happen, after the first nuke was detonated, the victim of that bomb would respond in kind, resulting in a full nuclear apocalypse as the world powers nuke each other to death. Without Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world would have learned why nukes should never be used in a much worse way. Inevitable? No. But the course Germany was on after WW1 was the perfect breeding ground for an authoritarian takeover of the country. Germany was already very violent during the Weimar Republic era. The collapse of the German monarchy, ineffectiveness of the Weimar Republic's successive governments, hyperinflation, and the broader conflicts of both communist revolution and European nationalism sprung forth from the collapse of the old empires of Europe made Germany a powder keg. There were armed uprisings, paramilitary violence, street gangs, and organizations being funded by foreign interests. It's impossible to say what could have happened had Hitler been a non-factor. The Nazi Party had support both in Germany and branches abroad in places like Austria and Czechoslovakia. The German Party was uniquely structured to serve the purposes of its leadership, and under different leadership may have formed into something else which wouldn't be able to grab as much power. Certainly, without charismatic leadership, any authoritarian party would struggle to persuade the public to go along with their power grab instead of an alternative. And there certainly were alternatives aplenty in Germany in the 1920s. There were monarchists, aristocrats and conservatives who wanted to reinstall the German monarchy, communists, both aligned with their Russian revolutionary counterparts and subscribed to their own revolutionary ideologies, and the military, which was a society unto with considerable itself in Germany before the armistice of 1919, which went underground rather than away when their power was limited by treaty. This is purely speculation on my part, but if the Nazi Party had simply never gained traction, I suspect a military coup would have taken place to overthrow the Weimar government. The German military was an already deeply established institution with the organization and arms to overthrow the government, which also held the respect of enough members of Germany society. The military was in the perfect position to eventually stage a coup and install whoever they saw fit as dictator. The correct answer is that Hitler was inevitable. The chaos that was Germany guaranteed that someone would exploit it to take power. And German history also guaranteed that the way to power was to ride anti-Semitism and tell the Germans that their problems were all the Jews' fault. So, Hitler. Remove the historical Hitler and another almost Hitler takes his place. Dictators always have financiers. When the money people identified him as a well-spoken zealot, be he German or not, they realized he would make weapons manufacturers a ton of money. Never mind the human toll. They still operate this way today, just on smaller scales. I think fascism was going to take root in post-World War I Germany no matter what. And fascism always requires scapegoats. Who those scapegoats would be and how far it would have gone, I don't think anyone can know. But I do think a large-scale war in the continent was inevitable. This is what real historians would call counterfactual. There is no way to know, because it didn't happen. What happened is what happened. History is the study of the past, specifically though records. Usually written, though new media is also in play for the past 150-ish years. Anything else is speculative fiction. The instability and power vacuum left in Germany after World War I, not to mention the Treaty of Versailles, created an opportunity for any kind of leader to rise up. It could have been a communist or another Hitler. I think it's less about the person and more about a flashpoint in history that a prospective leader could take advantage of. A second massive European war was likely inevitable based on how the First War ended. But the Holocaust in particular? Maybe not. The European part of World War II without Hitler would have managed to spawn some sort of idiotic warlord. Or it would have featured Stalin as the primary antagonist in Europe. I am legitimately unsure how much of the anti-Semitism that Hitler amplified was pre-existing and how much was directly inspired by Hitler's twisted leadership and communication. Himmler was the super evil one, continually scheming for more power and seeking to control every little aspect of the citizenry's lives. His grand plans for the Reich are really something impressive for how delusionally overreaching they are. He was the Dick Cheney to Hitler's George W. Bush. We think of WW1 and 2 in isolation, but really they were the culmination of a spiraling series of ever more devastating European conflicts that have been happening since antiquity. Hitler personally wasn't inevitable, but WW2 was. People forget that it was started by Germany and Russia invading Poland. Under different circumstances, WW2 would have been a Western alliance including Germany fighting off a full-scale USSR invasion of Eastern Europe. I'd say the Treaty of Versailles was ultimately more of the cause of WW2 than WW1 itself. My question is, would Germany have prevailed if someone other than Hitler was leader? A backlash from Germany post-WW1 was probably inevitable. The genocide was probably not.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Eracast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.